And so I want to be respectful of your time. So first of all, thank you to everyone for all your support and your time and your commitment during what has been, I will say, the most unusual time of my life, personally and professionally. So I want to thank each and every one of you. Tonight, we want to share with you the reopen plan for fall of the 21-22 school year. Before we go into the plan, this is our draft. Lisa, would you click on it, please? I was trying to click on it, but it wouldn't let me. Thank you. Can you make it just a little bit bigger? I can't even scroll. Can you make me the host so I can scroll? Is that possible? If I'm the host, then do I have to share my screen or can I just take over your screen?
I think you have to share your screen, so I can stop sharing so you can go ahead and share.
Okay.
All right, give me 1 minute. Go ahead.
Okay, I have to get to it now. Hold on. While other people are logging in, I will do this. The one I'm going to pull up probably says the steering committee, but it's the same one. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Is that yes, no?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to thank everyone again, as I said, for all your support and throughout the school year. And I want to introduce Dr. Is it Magruder Chappelle or Chappelle Magruder?
Chapel Magruder.
Chapel Magruder, I'm sorry, Dr. Chapel Magruder, who is our new director for the Oak Park and Department of Public Health. Thank you for joining us today. So as I indicated, this is our opening plan for fall of 21-22. And we try to, within this plan, address those things that we thought our parents would want to know, as well as those things that we are required to by the Illinois State Department of Education. And so you'll see a component in this plan that refers to ESSER. And ESSER is the funds that school districts and businesses and so forth have been given during this pandemic. There are certain components of the plan that must be addressed in ESSER. There's a component called learning loss. And that's not to say that our teachers didn't do an amazing job, because we know that they did over the school year, but learning loss is a requirement for the ESSER plan, along with social emotional development, health and safety, and capital improvements. And so, Greg, I'm going to turn it over for you to give like an overview of the plan, unless you want me to continue, and then we'll go to each component.
Oh, it's fine. I can do it, or you can do it. Either way is good.
You have it.
All right, I got it. So if you could scroll down a little bit further on this main page, everybody, and just take a look at the highlights here. So the biggest takeaway from the daily schedule, okay, is that we are planning to return to our regular 8-period bell schedule, okay, exactly as we have done in previous years, and exactly as is reflected kind of calendar-wise in our already approved calendar. which starts on August 13th for Husky Kickoff Day and August 12th for our faculty and staff with our Institute Day.
Did you want me to click on that?
There's no need. People can click on the doc if they'd like to. Just the big takeaway is the daily schedule. The daily schedule stays as it has previously been. No revised Bell schedule for next school year. And regarding first, learning loss and that phrase and what that means. This is a loss. I'm sorry, this is a loss. In some ways it is. This is a phrase that is required as part of the ESSER plan in order for us to receive the money that we have access to for ESSER, the $1.4 million. We have to speak to how we are addressing what they're describing as learning loss. And that has to be linked to 20% of our expenditures over the 3 years that we will have access to those funds. And so while that phrase has, I've heard from a few people that while that phrase has some sort of, understandably a negative implication that somehow as a school, especially last school year, we didn't do all that we could have done, that's not the case. The idea is that if and when there has been, families and students who haven't fully engaged in the learning process over the past few years for a variety of reasons, we need to have a plan in there for how we are going to help address those needs, support our students, and accelerate learning for them to whatever extent possible. And so what you see bulleted here, I'm not going to go through them point by point. You can all see them on the screen and read them. These are the elements that we will be able to speak to in the supporting documents that are linked regarding academically supporting our kiddos. So if you could scroll down to the next page, you see the exact same approach with this. This is a listing of what we have for our social and emotional supports. I believe Linda's going to be talking about that earlier. Lori will talking about the learning piece in just a little bit. And then the rest of the plan is made up of health and safety procedures here. And if you go further down, it talks about, I believe that's, or is that the end of it? Yeah, then we the appendices. So know that we still will have mitigations in place next year. I guess that's the big takeaway for that first part. There will still have to be some mitigations in place, and hopefully we'll know more soon about that. So yep.
Before we go to the ESSER part for Lori and Linda and Shalima and Ron and Chris, I just want to piggyback on what Greg just said about mitigations. We wish we knew more at this time. We do know that there will be mask wearing will be a mandate. We are not sure at this time about social distancing or of many of the other factors that were mitigations for this coming year. We've been told that the governor will move to phase 5, hopefully on June the 11th, and at that time we will have more information. Greg also mentioned the links. There are multiple links in the first part of this draft that link you to the most recent resolution presented by our state superintendent, Carmen Ayala. There's a link to the bridge to reopen from the governor. And then there's links to our mask wearing policy and so forth. So now we go into, and then we try to answer those questions that we know parents want to ask. So now as we go into the appendix, this is the information that is required by the Illinois State Board of Education. So Lori and Shalima, I'm going to turn it over to you for this part. And as Greg indicated, of the 14 million, that the 1.4 million, I keep getting that wrong, the 1.4 million of ESSER funds that the district will receive, there's 3 years to spend that. And these are the components that have to be addressed. Lori and Shalima.
I'll let Lori go first, and then I'll follow you, Lori, when it gets down to those last 3 bullets.
Okay, thank you, Shalima. So one of the things that we'll start with is really focusing on the learning gap that has been created over this past year and a half. And so basically what we'll be doing is asking our course-like teacher teams to look at the prerequisite skills for their course, identifying what those prerequisite skills are, identifying how they're going to determine if students have mastered those skills, and then identifying what supports they'll provide in the event that students are missing or have a gap in some prerequisite skill. And as Mr. Johnson said, this is not unique to any school year. Teachers do this every single school year. We are always assessing where kids are at in their learning and making adjustments as we move forward. So this year will be the same as previous years. We do anticipate maybe a few more learning gaps, but this is normal. We have some specific reading interventions that we will be providing. We do already provide those 4 reading interventions: World Study Immersion, Literacy Seminar, Literacy Connection, and College and Career Literacy. These are all specific literacy interventions that provide direct instruction to our students, freshmen through senior year, who struggle with an aspect of reading. Those classes, those interventions are specific to students who've been identified through a data-driven process of needing an intervention in those areas. We are prepared to offer more of those interventions should the data from this school year show the need. As far as in-school interventions relative to math, we have 3: pre-algebra block, extended algebra, and the Math Enrichment Center. Again, these are interventions and supports we currently have in place to provide targeted instruction around specific skills for students in the area of math. We are prepared to expand those opportunities should the data show we need to. As far as research-based programs, we use a program called IXL for Math, and it is a personalized online learning resource that, again, is a data-driven, student-selected opportunity. Relative to our technology, we will absolutely make sure that technology is accessible. We will extend what is available currently into some on-site computer labs available to all students on their devices. I think the next 3 are yours, right, Shalima?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. So the next part is all related to specialized interventions as it relates to services and supports for our diverse learners. And either our diverse learners that are being recommended or students that are being recommended for evaluations for special education. So the goal here is to provide intensive tier 3 interventions, academic and or social emotional, for our students that have experienced some significant their mental health needs or social emotional needs or academic needs have been further exacerbated by being remote, and or they have not been in school as part of hybrid. They have opted out and have been home since March of last year. We noticed that those students, as we're tracking just academic and attendance data, students that have been hospitalized, returning home and or school from being hospitalized, will require some support in terms of a bridge from how do you return from being remote and or being out of school back to in-person learning. So we wanted to make sure that we're providing an undergird of support for those students to make sure they're successful with that transition, as their disability has been, their needs have been very, very challenging for them as they have been either remote or struggled to participate via hybrid. The other part of that tier 3 intensive intervention is to look at if we have students that have some pretty significant academic needs where they require an alternative or modified platform for learning. Students that may require alternative modified curriculum for reading, such as using research-based curriculum, such as Lexia, Power of Literacy, or any other modified curriculum for math that they may require support with. The other part of some of the supports for our diverse learners is providing on-site evening learning lab options for diverse learners. In tracking attendance data, in tracking students' grades, we noticed that there was a trend for our juniors and senior diverse learners who some of them were significantly disengaged, hard to engage, where their attendance was below 70%, or they were receiving 2 or more Fs for grades as we were reviewing their grades and performance throughout the school year. Some of those students included McKinney-Vento students who were diverse learners, students who were working during the school day, and they felt like, you know, I place a lot of value on working and earning money, and therefore I've not been making sure that I've been accessible for school. So we wanted to make sure that we provide students who need to graduate opportunities for them to come in the evening 2 days a week to receive academic support. The last part is making sure that we kind of enhance our transition services for students who have the opportunity to return to school for transition services, as well as those students who are already receiving transition programming. How do we make sure that we are building those skills and supporting them for life after high school through transition services, especially post and during COVID-19?
In addition to those supports that we just mentioned, we also have our 8 to 9 connection, which is a support and a service we provide throughout the summer to our incoming freshman students as a way to connect to the high school, focus on English and math skills. Again, we will be prepared to expand those services should we need to. Additionally, we have a few services and supports we are considering. We want to consider utilizing the ESSER funds or portion of the ESSER funds to provide these. So they are all around targeted tutoring. So using data to ensure that our students that have the most needs, the significant learning gaps, receive these supports. So targeted tutoring in content areas, targeted tutoring in lieu of a study hall, utilizing some executive functioning tutoring that would expand beyond what we currently offer. So we currently have a class, students come out of that study hall and go into a formal class for 6 to 8 weeks, but we are considering possibly more of a drop-in service. We are looking to expand our tutoring. So in addition to our in-person tutoring center, we're looking to use some of those funds to possibly staff an online tutoring opportunity that could extend beyond our 4:30 time. So we know that as we return back to school and there's learning gaps, there's some learning impact, that students might benefit from some tutoring opportunities between 6 and 7 or 8, kind of a homework help type of lab. So we're looking for that. We're looking and considering looking at a community center and seeing if we can provide some tutoring one Saturday a month, getting some tutors, some maybe community members who could tutor, and supporting kids in an environment where they're comfortable, in an environment where they're used to going, maybe the library, things of that nature. And I think the next portion, I think goes back to you, Shalima.
The next portion is
The Tier 3 bridge intervention.
Are we on the next page or are we scrolling down?
Well, I clicked so that they could see the detail
Okay.
that you really just described. That if they click on this, it gives you more detail tied to specifics under each of those categories.
Thank you, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. If you scroll down to Pruitt-Adams, I can go over the next three. So just to expand on the Tier 3 interventions, those interventions will be twofold. A bridge for those students who are being recommended for Tier 3 support, may be recommended for special education evaluations, and current diverse learners. So those Tier 3 interventions are intensive, specialized interventions to support students with complex academic and social emotional needs. The interventions are identified and provided to students who are recommended for special education evaluations who may not qualify, and I want to highlight this, who may not qualify for an individualized education plan, but we want to ensure we are showing parents and students we still want to make sure that we're committed to supporting them despite whether they qualify for a special education or an IEP. Also, those intensive interventions are for current student diverse learners with IEPs returning from hospitalizations, as I've mentioned, and or experiencing a really significant decline or some distress in returning to in-person learning. How do we support them with providing a bridge from home to school? That's why you will see it is bridge to interventions. On-site evening learning labs, as I described, for students in grades 11 to 12 who receive special education services who are significantly credit deficient, had less than 70% attendance and or failing 2 or more classes. And that is all data that we have reviewed for this second semester up until this point. So this is all a data-driven process. I want to make sure that I highlight that. And then lastly, again, option for transition plus services, meaning how do we support those students who are 18 and above with transition services that prepare them for life after high school based on those transition goals and benchmarks they have outlined in their IEPs.
Are there any questions on the academic supports for Dr. Fiorenza and Ms. Francois Blue? I can't see everybody, so if there are questions, just say your name and ask your question. Okay, then hearing none, I'm going to show you how to navigate to go back. So one of the key pieces we wanted to do, as I said earlier, is to give you the detailed explanation. So Linda's going to speak to the social emotional. And if you go to the front, you'll see the bullet points. And Linda, I'm going to click on the detail so that you can address the bullet points.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So because of the stress and strain that the pandemic has had on everyone, we had to make sure that we had a comprehensive plan for returning back in the fall to addressing our students' social emotional concerns. Understanding that we're going to have something for the entire school community, but then also targeted for those who will need more based off of just what they are, what's manifesting within them when they come back to school. So the detailed supports kind of just back up what you saw in the initial plan, and I'm going to go over those so that you understand exactly what those are. So in terms of like tier 1 supports, which will be stretch out to our whole school community, we will be providing all of our advisory teachers with 3 days of activities that was created by our Emoja partnership. And it's aimed at building community and relationships within our spaces in the building. We're going to make sure that teachers have an idea of creating community agreements when we first start back in the fall, and how to use those within their classroom to help students be a part of the creation, and then making sure that students feel then welcomed and safe within those classroom environments throughout the school year. Those will be reference points for teacher and students so that they can make sure that they're and kids are holding other kids accountable within that space, as well as teachers being able to, based off the community agreements that were developed. Our PSS teams will be reviewing data from our early warning system in order to identify students who need more supports beyond our tier 1. We are going to be using a research-based universal screener in order to make sure that we're determining which students need which types of interventions that fall into 2 different categories, either acquisition-based interventions or performance-based interventions. And we are using curriculum within those spaces that's going to that are research-based to help students to engage in a different level and get themselves more acclimated to what's necessary to be successful in their academic pursuits at the school. And you'll see there that we mentioned just a couple that we will be using, but there are 5 different, and all of these are presented in our MTSS SEB plan that was presented to the board and that we will be implementing in the fall. Specifically, what our social workers will be doing, separate from their individual meetings to support students who have experienced challenges. We have our advisory wellness drop-ins where social workers will be going into advisories every day in order to focus on building students' capacities to build skills and regulate their own emotions, and just help them to identify what the tolerable stress is and understanding how to work on that for themselves or regulate that for themselves. Keeping in mind, social workers have approximately 30 advisories each, so they will visit each class twice a semester as they're pushing in. They will also be pushing into classrooms in partnership with teachers who will allow them to come in to present mini lessons on various wellness topics, such as coping strategies, self-regulation, or mindfulness. We are also trying to be very ambitious about planning some all-school wellness days. Those still are in the process of being built, but just once a semester following a special bell schedule to allow students and the adults in the building, the teachers in the building, to participate in a variety of interactive activities that's geared towards wellness and overall self-care. And then finally, they will produce, our social workers, a wellness bulletin that will be published quarterly with articles and topics that will include self-care, getting involved, gratitude, appreciating self-qualities, and different topics as of that, just to build a more healthier school body for the mind and spirit. And so those are the social emotional supports that will be built into our school year and school days.
Are there any questions of Linda regarding the social emotional supports? Is there something in the chat? Let me see.
It's about masks.
We can go back to that. The board has, just really quickly, the question was asked, can we discuss the mask mandate further, as this is contradictory to the CDC masking guidelines, the full vaccinated students and teachers. This is also not beneficial to the students' social emotional. We are waiting for additional guidance from ISB. We, in the resolution from Dr. Carmen Ayala, which is attached to this document, she lists the different mitigations. In our superintendent's meeting and in the webinar, we were told that mask wearing at this point in time would be required. And until we get notice from the state, that's what we will be required to do. We were also told that while the CDC may lessen some of their mitigations, the governor has the authority to keep some in place for schools. And so we hope to know more specifically on June 11th what that will be, but as of date, we have been told that mask will be a requirement. Now, there was in the bridge document we received, it did talk about fully vaccinated adults, but that spoke actually to the social distancing between students and adults. I hope that helps to answer your question. As soon as we get more information, that will be updated. That's why this is a draft. We wanted to get it out in a timely manner, but we will get the other information on the 11th. If there are no questions of Linda, then we will go to the health safety component. Ron?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, with the health and safety component, we'll keep doing what we were doing with the hand sanitizing, the cleaning protocols. The custodians will continue to clean the building multiple times a day with sanitizing. We'll implement also with the social distancing. We'll still have signs depending on what the guidelines come out to be. If it's whatever the social distancing is, we'll have signs according to that would comply to whatever it is. The on-site, we have, I don't know if Julie wanted to talk about the on-site diagnostic testing. We'll have that.
Would you speak to Bionex?
Sure. So Bionex now is an FDA-approved rapid antigen test that is actually sold in stores now. But it was approved for use in schools and CLIA laboratory approved sites, which we obtained a CLIA certificate just a little bit earlier this year. So with the way that we use the Bionex testing is it was originally used only for symptomatic people. It can be used for asymptomatic people who have had known exposure to COVID now. And that guidance just came out in March, I believe. The reason that it's diagnostic is because every time we test somebody at the school, whether the results are positive, negative, or inconclusive, we have to report it in the state's REDCap reporting system. So that is the actual count that will go into the state's COVID, COVID numbers in terms of testing, and then in terms of any positive tests that that pop up. So what we would be doing is, again, if we have a student in the office that is displaying COVID symptoms, we would take them into our isolation room, do the Binax Now test on them, report it, and then depending on the results, obviously sort of take it from there. One thing I do want to stress that I think is really important along with the Binax Now is and we can address this at another time, I suppose, but we really want to make sure that teachers in classrooms are able to keep good seating charts so that we are able to quarantine only the necessary students who are exposed to a positive case per whatever CDC guidance, however that changes, so that, we only go, 6 feet front, back, left, and right, and not have to quarantine an entire classroom. And again, this will probably change, but with the use of the Binax Now, that allows us to do on-site testing of anybody that we feel could be symptomatic within the school day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. We also will, in addition to our regular trainings that we have on an annual basis, we've included COVID training, which has specialized cleaning measures and other trainings that our supply company provided us with, and we started doing it this year. So this will be our second time doing it, and we're going to do that on an annual basis because it's not just for COVID; it's for any diseases, along with our bloodborne pathogens and all of those type of trainings that we do on an annual basis. We purchased a number of supplies that we put also inside of all of classrooms that's available to the teachers for disinfecting, as well as the staff. The maintenance staff who has access to it. We also have a product called Nemesis. That's one of our OSHA approved cleaners that has a 1-minute kill time, and we have that available we think we purchased at least enough for another semester or two to have on hand. And do you want to show? Well, everything I cover is within that link as well.
Okay. Mike P., did you want to speak to, because we don't know the social distancing at this time for lunch. Right now it's currently 6 feet facing in the same direction, which is truly a challenge for us and other high schools and schools in the area. So Mike P., would you want to speak to providing meals?
Right now it's going to be 3 meals for every child in the building. So depending on where we can put them, we'll have employees there with carts that will have different types of meals that the child could pick in wherever we are going to be able to seat them. So we'll be able to feed them. It's just a matter of where they'll be able to sit and eat.
Okay, thank you. One of the other comments from Dr. Tabak was CDC guidance does not require children or teachers who are fully vaccinated to quarantine if they are asymptomatic. One of the other, and you're right, one of the other challenges for us is we are also governed under the Department of Public Health, and we seek guidance from them as well. But you're absolutely correct with that.
I have a quick question. This is Misty Olson on lunches. Hi. What about off-campus lunches? So, worst case scenario, there are still a lot of mitigations in place for, having to wear masks, but then not being able to eat in the lunchrooms. Is there, what will the off-campus lunch policy be? Is that like a junior senior thing, or is that in consideration? Again, if worst case scenario, we have to try to be creative during lunch periods.
It's been discussed. Pre-pandemic, I believe it was juniors and seniors who were in good standing, had an open campus and able to go and come back. That decision has not been finalized at this time. We were hoping to get more direction from ISB, but we've talked about tents on the yard. We've talked about lunch and spaces in hallways, but nothing has been finalized at this point. We're still waiting on some guidance. Hopefully, the guidance will say, we know we're supposed to have full in-person next year. We do know that, but hopefully the guidance will be different for lunch. Then once that is out, then a formal decision can be made. Greg, did you want to add anything to that?
No, actually, that covers the whole thing. So we know that if the guidance does not allow for, a significant reductions in the mitigations, that we're going to have to get really creative. And likely it's a combination of everything that Dr. Pruitt-Adams just said that we're going to have to put in place. Expanding access to off-campus lunch, being creative about the various spaces. We've even talked about identifying some spaces where cafeteria specific, like internal spaces of the building, some places where internal, I'm sorry, some spaces where people bring their own lunch, that's where they would go. And then other spaces would be, lunches that they could buy, try to differentiate that way to help maximize space. Whatever we do, we know that we're going to have to, utilize, our existing supervision and security folks to help make that, to the extent the folks are internal.
And I know there's a lot of unknowns, so I'm probably asking questions that you don't know the answer to, but I will ask anyway. If there are still social distancing, when they say full in-person school, is that referring to like a normal school day? Or would an A-B schedule still be on the table if we're trying to accommodate some kind of social distancing?
Districts have the latitude. Some districts do an A-day, B-day schedule, irrespective of a pandemic. That's how they have their schedule. What we've been told is that the expectation is that schools will be full in person next year for all students. The one caveat is those students who, for medical reasons, cannot get a COVID vaccine, or who are quarantined due to COVID. We've asked multiple questions of the State Department based on parents who just don't believe in immunizations. If those students could be remote, we've been told no. We asked if for religious reasons, parents don't want to get their kid vaccinated, do they qualify for remote? We were told no. However, I will say to you, our district, along with approximately 8 other districts that fall within the West 40 regional office area, have had some conversations about a remote school. We currently have ALOP, which is a remote school for us. Okay, Dr. Weber, I couldn't see your hand. Someone just told me it was up. Let me finish this statement and I'll get to you. And so we are investigating the aspect of remote school for those kids who are either medically fragile, those students who thrive. There were some students who actually thrived in a remote setting, and those students who are diverse learners. We've been told it is likely going to happen, and if it happens, it will be sponsored, and the teachers assigned will be assigned through the State Department, and particularly the West 40 region, similar to our ALOP program, which is currently a computer-assisted instructional program. We are looking, part of the investigation is trying to see if that can be a K-12 configuration. It was our hope to have a final decision at the end of May, but we are still waiting to hear if that is going to pan out. But other than that, ISB has been very specific that all kids will be in person, and districts will need to figure it out.
And that means, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, and that means all kids every day, not all kids, right?
Every day.
Gotcha. That's the only clarification. Perfect.
Well, what I've heard other folks talk about, other schools talk about is, they interpret the guidance that we have thus far, the limited guidance that we have for next school year is, you are returning. You should prepare to return to your existing schedules, what you had pre-pandemic. That's the intent. And also there was a question about, Jolene, could you clarify the capacity of the West 40? I know you mentioned 200, right?
Oh, yes.
For all
Oh,
schools, that's not for us.
Right. West 40 says the maximum number of students they could accommodate would be 200. And so each district had to we had to respond to a survey as to the student clientele we would hope to have access to the remote environment and how many. And so we indicated medically fragile, students who thrive, and diverse learners, and we asked for 10 slots. Did that help, Greg? Okay, Dr. Weber, they tell me your hand was up. I can't see you. Do you want to ask your question?
Thanks very much, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. I do want to thank everyone for all the work that's gone into this. I do want to add on to Dr. Tabak's observation, and the statement that was just made, I think, was really key, which is, we have to prepare for something. And I think, Greg, you said that we have to prepare for something, and that becomes our expectation, but then we'll have to be responsive to whatever's going on. And that's got to hold true on some of these mitigating factors around infection prevention. And I think we do well, as we're talking about it, to preface all this by saying, as of today and now, because there's two outcomes here. The pandemic could surprise some of the clinicians and epidemiologists on the line and surge in a way that makes in-person impossible. I don't expect that to be the case remotely, but the far more likely scenario is some of the things that we're talking about will not be necessary. And I think it's important we give voice to the fact that as of today, we have to think about masks, but our expectation is that that likely won't be the case. And then to the Binax now and the precautions that were highlighted, it's a good plan, it's reasonable, but as Dr. Tabak pointed out in the chat, or in the comments, that should not be necessary by what we see. And again, we'll always defer to our local jurisdictional public health authorities, who I think are on the line right now, but we need to continue these conversations because obviously there is a price to be paid for being overly conservative about this. And I think to the larger community, we need to let them know that some of this will evolve, and it should evolve to be less intensive, less restrictive, less constraining. The last thing about the Binax now is I hope we move into a window in which it becomes less commonplace that folks are coming to work or to school sick in the first place. So Binax now, it may be tricky with symptomatic but vaccinated people. We don't know the performance yet, but my overall caution is just every time we're talking about the precautions, please preface to say, for now, this is likely to change, because it will change. And I think we're going to make a lot of people really anxious if we're basically seen as putting forward a plan that ignores the fact that there's a vaccine and that case counts are going down. So I don't want to overstate it. I understand where we're at right now, but let's be deliberate so that we don't agitate folks into feeling like we're going to be facing exactly what we did last fall, this coming fall.
You make a good point, Dr. Weber. Dr. Chappell also chimed in that fully vaccinated students and teachers are currently exempt from quarantine, and that is in the document. We didn't speak to that yet, but it's in the document that if you are named in close contact and you are fully vaccinated, you do not have to quarantine. The other thing that's in the document is we will no longer be doing the saliva screening. We feel that we're at a point with the students in our school system being, and then within our community being vaccinated, that's no longer less necessary. The state has also given districts the option to do the health screener. We've opted not to do that as well. So right now, the two mitigations we have in place are the buy next now, and that's for someone if they are asymptomatic, and the mask wearing. Those are the two that we currently have in the plan to be in place. But that's, as we said, this is the draft. We are still waiting on information as well from the State Department. And Dr. Tabak also suggested that maybe we have a separate meeting with administration and the medical professionals, you know, to really talk about next year and those things that are not supported by medical science.
Hi, it's Dr. Tabak. I mean, I don't mean to beat this issue to death here, but, you know, as a provider in the community and seeing teenagers constantly, you know, I don't know what the rates are for vaccination as of this time, but we have reached out to all of our patients, and I do feel like the majority of the families we see are certainly becoming, you know, getting their kids vaccinated. And, you know, this is negative for their self-esteem. They don't want to be in school 6 feet apart from their friends. They want to eat lunch at a table with their friends. They're vaccinated. They play sports. They want to play their sports. They don't want to wear masks. Is anyone lobbying the governor and the higher up people in the state? Because I appreciate this is sort of hypothetical right now, but
Well,
you know, we have to lobby the people in power, because, you know, these guidelines don't make sense. They're not fair to the children who and the families who've chosen to vaccinate their students. I appreciate if families don't believe in the vaccine or don't want to vaccinate, then, you know, remote option may be better for those students. But for the majority of parents who've chosen to vaccinate their children, they want their children to have a normal year. They want them to be mask free. They want them to be sitting at lunch tables with their friends. At what point do we lobby the governor? Because if he doesn't change his guidelines in the next couple of weeks, you know, this is a big what if, but at some point, someone in the administration, someone in the health department, someone needs to be lobbying them that, and I agree with what Dr. Weber said, you know, things may change, but as of now, we've had 4 cases of, you know, 4 positive cases in Oak Park, and we're not letting our children sit at a lunch table with their friends when they're all vaccinated because 4 people in our community had COVID.
So I feel compelled to say this. First of all, Dr. Chappell put in today 30% of the 16 and 8-year-olds have received at least 1 dose. We actually hosted with Walgreens and the Oak Park Department of Public Health a couple of weeks ago, where they could have vaccinated 2,000 individuals. I think that was the 12 and up group. So that those things are being done. I do want to say, Dr. Tabak, we hear you. We hear Dr. Weber. But also as a school district, we have guidelines that have been imposed upon us by the Illinois State Board of Education and the state superintendent that we must abide by. We have superintendents all signed a letter about a month or so ago, hitting those things about social distancing, hitting the mask wearing, hitting all of that. In the meeting last week with the state superintendent, we asked those questions again. We were told that until the governor puts out his message on the 11th, they cannot answer those questions for us. So we hear you. We want our kids back in school. We understand the impact that the mask have. We understand all of that. And so I don't want you to think we are not pushing with the governor, that we are not pushing with the state. We are. But until they tell us what we can and cannot do, that is what we are abiding by. It's like we think, you know, we should be able to offer remote to those families who want it. We can't. So we hear you. But we have these rules and guidelines that we must follow.
If 30% of the 16 to 18-year-olds have received their vaccine per Dr. Chappell, I mean, is there a way, I know you can't mandate the vaccine, obviously, because it's not fully FDA approved. Obviously, that's very controversial. Is there a way that perhaps, and that number seems awfully low to me. I don't know if that's, you know, if people got their vaccine in Indiana or if they got their vaccine, which a lot of kids did, and they went to get it in Indiana before it was, they were eligible here in Illinois in mid-April. So I'm not sure if those numbers are accurate, but again, I don't know. I'm not a health department person. Is there a way for the school to perhaps, you know, strongly encourage students, especially athletes and kids that will be in close contact? You know, let's run a vaccine drive for the basketball team, the football team, you know, to really encourage vaccination and give people an incentive to do it. Because if you're saying, well, you're going to come to school masked and 6 feet apart, then many of these families are like, well, then why get the vaccine? But if we can sort of strongly encourage and give someone something to look forward to, I think that would benefit everybody.
We have advertised. Every time there's a clinic, we advertise for Oak Park, and we advertise for River Forest. I believe the numbers that Dr. Chappell indicated are those that have gone through the Oak Park Department of Public Health. You know, we can ask. Hello?
Yes, so those numbers are for all Oak Park addresses. We get, for those people who got vaccinated out of state, that tends to happen earlier in the, when the vaccine was available. There was a delay of about 6 weeks, so we got a major dump, maybe about 2 weeks ago, of more data. I don't expect that to continue to happen since we were able to vaccinate 16 and 18-year-olds in the state more recently. So those numbers reflect all Oak Park addresses to date.
Okay, thank you. We advertise, we encourage. We've been told we cannot mandate, but we do encourage people to get vaccinated.
I also want to clarify an earlier point if we are, but I don't want to transition away from this exact conversation until we're ready. So if there are other comments on this one, I'll hold. And maybe not. There was a comment made earlier about how we handle our bell schedules and the idea of whether it be possible to go to an A-B schedule and what that might look like and so on and so forth. The A-B, that is something that, again, with what we are getting from and the intent of the language we have, we intend and we absolutely hope that we are going to be able to do a full bell schedule. That is a separate conversation in many ways from responding to some of the feedback that we got from both internal, our teachers and some students and definitely some community members about looking at a potential for a block schedule as a permanent thing. Going for like what we did this last semester, this last school year, was kind of it's kind of a crude block schedule. We just divided up our 8-period schedule in half and went after it. We rearranged some of the periods, but it was kind of crude in the sense that, you know, the duration of classes was different, and it was inevitable that we would have had some kids every single day who have an empty period in the middle of the day because of how the sequence unfolds. A good block schedule that's well designed from the get-go, when you're thinking about your master schedule, wouldn't have those things. And that process it takes some development from the ground up. So I just want to clarify that while we are still having those conversations about a block schedule down the road, that's different from what we've done these past 2 years. So I got some questions about confusion on that, so I wanted to add to that.
Thank you.
Yep.
The other component that has to be addressed in ESSER is that of capital improvements. And so Ron, if you would speak, you and Chris would speak to capital improvements.
Yes. One of the major things in capital improvement that we were working on is the improvement of the air quality. We're continuously adding bipolar ionization into the air handling unit and using MERV 13 filters inside of our air handling units as well. The classrooms, we had identified 31 classrooms that we had to use bipolar ionization because of the units could not accept a MERV 13 filter, so we upgraded it to bipolar ionization to fulfill those needs of the air quality in those spaces. When it comes to making needed repairs, we looked at what we're currently doing within our capital improvement plan. We're upgrading a total of 60 classrooms, and within those 60 classrooms, we have 15 that are being built new. Those will have the new filtration systems built into them that will be COVID approved filtration, and also the classroom technology, which Chris will touch on. Chris, are you there?
Yeah, so with the next portion there, the purchase of in-class technology to enhance instruction. Through the pandemic, we were moderately successful in supporting technology through remaining flexible. And we expect no difference in that protocol. So what we found effective, what teachers found effective, we want to continue to make that readily available for instruction. Any special areas for instruction, we want to make sure that it's equipped with the same type of technology that's found to be effective in a classroom. More specifically, things that we have more concrete concepts around, network security, huge explosion in cybersecurity issues and ransomware attacks throughout the nation on government agencies, including education. And so it's vital in order to make sure that we have reliable access to instructional tech, that we improve our security around that arena. And so we are looking at components that can be integrated into our existing system, enhance the security and reliability, and increase our defenses on the cybersecurity front. Large auditorium streaming equipment, including audiovisual, integrated into the existing system. As we have found through the pandemic, there are events that are more equally accessible and have reached a wider audience through being virtual. And so we are working on one of the points that was brought up in the framework that we were giving for ESSER in order to enhance, especially our auditorium, so that if there are events that are family outreach events, as well as fine arts performances and so forth, that we can leverage the technology that we found effective during the pandemic and make it more reliable than some of the piecemeal methods that we were using during the pandemic itself.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions of Chris and Ron regarding that? And if not, then I'll go back to the chat. One of the things noted by Jennifer Anderson was that her question is, if a student comes to school, since remote, I'm paraphrasing, since remote is not an option unless you meet the criteria established by ISB, should a kid come to school experiencing cold symptoms, which could be perceived as COVID symptoms, will they get the Bionex now at school? And the answer would be yes. However, we would hope, as you indicated, the parents would not send their child to school ill. And then the question from Dr. Tabak to Dr. Chappell was about the data for 12 and up. And the response was 22% have their first dose as of the 24th. And then she would run the new numbers to capture last week. One of the other,
sorry. Will there be accommodations to the attendance policy then next year as well, if we're going to be, if for, again, I'll be honest, if my kid had a sniffle, I would probably still send them to school, but that's a COVID symptom. So are we going to tell parents, don't send your kids to school with sniffles because it could be COVID, in which case that could greatly impact attendance? So just curious if there will be accommodations with that, or how to kind of mitigate, what sending your kid to school sick might look like.
We've not had a discussion at this point about the attendance policy. I don't know if Julie has any advice on what we should say to parents with regards to sending their kid to school with the sniffles, or if Dr. Chappell would like to chime in with maybe some suggested guidance for us to give to parents.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that sniffles aren't a COVID symptom, but I thought that that was removed, but I'm not sure. I think that Dr. Chappell can speak better than I can to that at this moment.
Yes, sniffles wouldn't count for a COVID symptom, but I do like the suggestion right above that says that if our vaccination rates still remain low within our children, then maybe we should still consider the saliva testing.
You say we still should consider it?
Yes, if we have low vaccination rates amongst the children, then I think that that would be a good mitigation method to have in place.
What would be a time frame? So school starts August the 13th, I believe. So if we were going to make another decision to do the saliva screening, which right now we were not moving forward, do you know when we would have some substantive data to support that decision?
I can run the data for children on a weekly basis. I tend to do it every Wednesday. So I can keep you up to date what the vaccination rates are for 12 and above. And in order to get the Binex test from me, that wouldn't be anything. I can get you guys all the testing you need within 2 days' notice.
Okay, thank you. That's extremely helpful.
I have one other follow-up question. I know from, as an employer, I can do different things at my office in terms of who's vaccinated and who's not. I can say only vaccinated people can return to my office. I know we can't say that obviously for students. We want everybody back regardless. But can there be, if we did go back to saliva testing and symptom screeners, could vaccinated children be excluded from that? Could vaccinated children be excluded from, from other mitigations perhaps? Is there, or is that not something you can do, or is that something?
That's actually what I was suggesting. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. Only saliva testing for those unvaccinated.
Lynn, can I say something?
Yes.
It's difficult in a school, in any school, to other children. So you can't have like two lines, like a vaccinated, non-vaccinated line where people have to show the Qualtrics screener and some people don't. As a classroom teacher, I'm not privy to people's vaccination records. And so it would be impossible for me to know who's vaccinated, who's not, in terms of my students, where I could say you can have your mask off or you can be socially distanced, depending on what the state of Illinois says. So it's more difficult, it's complicated we really run the risk of othering children in a school that's against everything we believe in.
Hey, it's Dr. Tabak. I made the original comment about, suggesting a way to encourage more families to vaccinate their children because, if we can't mandate vaccinations, but if, it's mandated to, so I'm not saying they have two lines, one for vaccinated children, one for non-vaccinated children, but what I am suggesting, which, might be worth considering, is that since the saliva testing is a very effective screener, much more than the Binax, which is not a very effective screener, whereas the saliva testing has been, I think, very good for the high school, that, as a way to encourage people to vaccinate, there's a benefit if you vaccinate your child privately out of school, then you don't have to subject to the weekly saliva testing. You don't have to subject your child to the daily screeners and things. Because as a parent, it's a pain to run to the school with saliva tests. It's a pain to answer that question every morning. So if my child's fully vaccinated, he or she doesn't, or they don't need to be, subject to that. And that's a benefit to the families. And that might encourage more families to then choose to vaccinate their children if they see there's a nice little prize at the end.
So I think what Ms. Harden is trying to say is, well, for one, we've been told we can't mandate whether or not someone tells us that their child is vaccinated or if an employee is vaccinated and showing us their card, because that's then sharing a medical record. That's what we've been told. But what she's saying is, like, we know now if we call someone and say your child's been in close contact, and if they tell us, well, my child's been vaccinated, then we say, well, your child does not have to quarantine. What she's saying is, on the forefront of that, we can't mandate. So how do we know that Joy Lynn's been vaccinated, but Greg hasn't? And so who should be taking the saliva screening and who shouldn't? And if we are saying, well, Joy Lynn and Greg have not been vaccinated, but Sheila has so she doesn't have to take it. That's what she means by othering the child. We're actually identifying a child who's not vaccinated, which could then lead to other legal implications should a parent choose to push that. That's
Well-
what she's trying to indicate.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. This is Misty, and I do know that as an employer, we have similar guidelines. So what our legal folks have advised is it's a voluntary submission
Right.
it's voluntary. If you want to share your vaccination status, you can. We cannot mandate it. We would never require it. But by sharing it, it can unlock, quote unquote, extra, I hate to use the word privileges, but now, okay, you need to be vaccinated to come in the office. And if you want to share it, then you can come in. If you don't, that's cool. You can do remote, you can do whatever. And again, I know that's not exactly the same, but what Dr. Chappell was saying, could people voluntarily share their vaccination status to opt out of the saliva screen?
I think, can I jump in? I think the question here would be, to what extent would saliva be a deterrent for students to want to come to the school or to participate in different events? And I know we absolutely all want to encourage as much vaccination as possible. I mean, whatever we can do to get that word out and encourage that, I think we need to do. But if it would have the effect of preventing, of increasing a barrier, of introducing a barrier to student access to their activities or to attending school, we would have to we'd have to find some way to mitigate that. So I think that's all. We just have to make sure that whatever we put in place, it's not stopping student access to school. That's the key. Because what we did before, it wasn't a big issue with first semester or this past school year, because the state deemed that hybrid learning was sufficient. Remote learning was on par with in-person learning for the purposes of providing education, and it didn't constitute a barrier to that education. That's not possible as we go into next school year. That type of hybrid environment, that type of at-home learning, that's not there. So we just have to make sure we don't have a piece in place that creates a barrier. So, but there's a lot of unknowns. I think a lot of these questions are going to get really nailed down when we get clear guidance about vaccinations and how we can use them as mitigations.
That is the hope. You're absolutely correct.
Have to give us very clear guidance. And right now we're stuck in this weird situation because we don't have that clarity.
Yeah. One of the requests that was made is that we have another meeting with the medical professionals. I am open to that. The soonest we could do it would possibly be next Tuesday, if that is of interest to all the medical professionals and the members of this committee from staff who are on the medical professionals committee. But I would almost suggest that we wait until after the 11th for the governor to make his decision, because some of this may then be a moot issue. Any comments on that?
Hi, it's Dr. Tabak. Yeah, that's what I was suggesting when I think I made that original comment in the chat, is that, yes, I think as a medical committee, it'd be nice to meet after the governor makes his recommendations, because again, yes, we are talking about hypothetical for the fall, but it is frustrating as a medical professional that, and again, I'm not a politician, I don't know who's in charge, but nothing is reflecting, what the science and the data are showing us. And it's just becoming more and more frustrating. So yes, I would love to meet after the 11th when we get more information. And if anyone else in this, the medical professionals want to chime in, great, thank you.
Please chime in. I can't see everyone. We know that Dr. Tabak is for having another meeting. Ms. Horton nodded her head. She's interested. Mr. You are correct. The rules will continue to change. Dr. Weber, Dr. Chappell, would you be interested in a subcommittee meeting? Dr.
I
Chapel
think
said
Dr. Weber
yes.
had to jump off. I think Dr. Weber had to jump off, but
Okay,
I suspect if you email him, he would probably be responsive.
okay. So I will do that, even if you weren't a member of the subcommittee, like Ms. Anderson, I think you were on a different committee. I will send you that information.
Thank you.
Okay, Julie says she's fine. Okay. So as we said, what we presented to you is a draft. We know that things will change as we wait on information from ISB. Our hope was to give you enough information and our parents enough information by all the links that were contained for them to be able to navigate the plan, know what's coming, have access to the state superintendent's resolution, as well as the bridge document. This plan will continuously be updated as we get more information. The ESSER, which was the piece that had to have those 4 components addressed, does require a public hearing or / public comment. So we will be presenting this on the 10th to the Board of Education. And as a draft, we will be presenting it. We will allow time for public comments on this specific topic as well. And then we will ask the board to approve it at the special following that meeting so that it can be sent to ISB and put on the website. The application window for ESSER funds, that 1.4 million, opens up on July 1, and districts have to be have everything locked down at least, I want to screw it up, 30 days or 60 days, Karen, I can't remember, before the funds are expended.
30.
30, okay. So once again, thank you for your time. If there are no more questions, we will take the feedback we got today. We'll get a meeting scheduled for the medical professionals. We can send the invitation to everyone and you can log in if you choose to log in. For those of you who choose not to, this is my last meeting with you as I will be retiring in less than 4 weeks now. So it has been a pleasure. And once again, thank you for your insight and your support during these challenging times.